His hands were shaking more than mine, which, considering I was the one holding the needle, was saying something. It was a late autumn evening, the kind where the sky goes dark by 5 and everyone in the city seems to pull inward, like they're conserving heat. I was finishing up a double shift at the clinic when my phone buzzed. A friend of a friend, someone's older brother. A message that said, essentially, "Please, I don't want to go to the ER. Can you just come over? I'll explain when you get there." I should have said no. I had cold feet, a lukewarm cup of tea waiting for me at home, and approximately 0 desire to haul my kit across town on a Tuesday evening. But there was something in the phrasing, "I'll explain when you get there," that got me. It always does. The unfinished sentence, the thing someone can't quite say in a text. His name was Daniel. He opened the door in a gray sweater that had seen better days, one hand gripping the doorframe like it was doing him a personal favor by staying upright. Late 30s, maybe. Dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd been fighting something. A fever, a bad week, maybe both, for longer than he wanted to admit. "You're the nurse," he said. Not a question, more like relief dressed up as a statement. "I am," I said, "and you're the one who's been putting this off." He laughed a little, just a little, but it was enough. Inside, his apartment smelled like eucalyptus and old books, which is a combination I have decided I will always associate with people who are quietly interesting and absolutely terrible at asking for help. He'd been prescribed an intramuscular injection, a course of B vitamins and something for inflammation, after a bout with a nasty respiratory infection that had dragged on for weeks. His regular doctor was out of town. The pharmacy had filled the prescription. The syringes were sitting in a paper bag on his kitchen counter, untouched because, and I say this with full professional tenderness, he was terrified. "It's not that I'm scared of needles," he said in the voice of someone who is absolutely scared of needles. "Of course not," I said. The last time someone gave me a shot, I passed out." I set my bag down on his kitchen table and looked at him properly. He had the posture of a man who was trying very hard to appear casual while internally composing his last will and testament. "Okay," I said, "here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk for a few minutes. You're going to make me a cup of tea if you have any, and by the time the kettle boils, you're going to feel considerably less like this is a medical procedure and considerably more like it's just Tuesday." He blinked. "That's your technique?" "That's the beginning of my technique." He made the tea. Earl Grey, which I respected, and while he moved around his small kitchen, unhurried now, a little distracted, I laid out what I needed on a clean section of counter. Gloves, alcohol swabs, the syringe already drawn, a cotton ball. It's a small ritual, that preparation. I've done it hundreds of times, and I still find something settling about the order of it. Everything in its place before you begin. The injection was going into the gluteus, the upper outer quadrant of the muscle, which is the standard site for intramuscular injections of this kind. It's not glamorous, but it is, genuinely, the safest and most comfortable option for oil-based or larger volume solutions, because the muscle there is dense and well perfused, meaning the medication absorbs evenly and the discomfort is minimal when it's done correctly. I explained this to him while he drank his tea, because I've found that knowledge is one of the most underrated forms of comfort. People are afraid of what they can't see and can't understand. Give them the map, and suddenly the territory feels smaller. The most important thing you can do, I told him, is relax the muscle completely. That means no tensing, no bracing, no gripping the counter like it owes you money. He looked at his hand, loosened it slightly. The needle goes in at a 90-degree angle, straight in, confident, no hesitation. Hesitation is actually what causes more pain, because a slow entry gives the muscle time to react. Fast and sure is kinder than slow and careful. Counterintuitive, but true. You're describing this very calmly, he said. I am a very calm person, I said. Which is mostly true, except when I'm running late or someone reorganizes the supply cabinet without telling anyone. We moved to his bedroom. More privacy, better positioning. He lay face down on the bed, arms at his sides, and I asked him to let his toes point slightly inward. It's a small thing, but it rotates the hip just enough to soften the gluteal muscle. Makes the whole experience gentler. I've seen nurses skip that step, and I always want to say something. I never do, but I think it loudly. I put on my gloves, that familiar snap of latex, the slight compression around the fingers, and clean the site with an alcohol swab in a circular motion, outward from center. Let it dry for a few seconds. This matters. Introducing alcohol into the tissue stings, and it's entirely avoidable if you're patient. Take a slow breath in, I said. He did. And out. And somewhere in the exhale, I placed my left hand flat against the muscle. Firm, grounding, a kind of wordless, I'm here. And with my right, I inserted the needle. One clean motion, 90 degrees, all the way to the hub. He made a small sound. Not pain, more like surprise at the absence of it. I aspirated briefly, just a second, just to confirm placement, and then pressed the plunger slowly, evenly, over about 10 seconds. Oil-based solutions need time. Rush it and you create pressure in the tissue that the body doesn't appreciate. Slow is kind here, even when fast is kind at the entry. Medicine is full of these small contradictions. I withdrew the needle at the same angle it went in, pressed the cotton ball gently against the site, and rubbed in small circles to help the medication disperse. Done, I said. A long pause. That's it? That's it? He turned his head to look at me over his shoulder, and there was something in his expression. Not gratitude exactly, but something adjacent to it. Relief mixed with a kind of sheepishness, like a man who'd spent 3 weeks afraid of a Tuesday evening. I feel slightly ridiculous, he said. You feel slightly ridiculous, and you've completed day 1 of your course, I said. Which is 2 things at once. That's efficient. While I cleaned up, I mentioned, because it seemed relevant, that he should watch his temperature over the next few days. Respiratory infections have a way of staging a quiet comeback when you think you've beaten them. If his fever returned and climbed above 103 degrees Fahrenheit, that was a conversation for an actual doctor, not a friend of a friend nurse on a Tuesday evening. And he should drink water. Actual water. Not coffee pretending to be water. How much water? He asked. More than you think you need, I said. That's always the answer. He walked me to the door. The city outside had gone quiet the way cities do late in the evening. Not silent, just softer, like it had let out a long breath. Same time tomorrow? He asked. It was light, almost joking. Almost. Same time tomorrow, I said. And I meant it as a professional arrangement. Mostly. There's something I've never quite been able to explain to people who haven't done this kind of work. The particular quality of trust that happens in that moment before a needle. It's not about the needle at all, really. It's about a person deciding, in spite of everything their body is telling them to do, to hold still. To let someone close. To believe that the brief, sharp thing coming is in service of something better. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot.